It was an expensive show for the production company and for the network, and it was an expensive show for me. Everything that I was taking in, I was basically putting back into the company to meet deadlines.
Counting Cars didn't end. It just disappeared, and nobody was told why. After more than a decade on air, the hit show quietly stopped releasing new episodes, leaving fans confused while rumors about Danny Koker spread across the internet. But the real story isn't one shocking moment. It's a series of behind-the-scenes issues that slowly tore the show apart. So what actually caused it to end abruptly? And why did the truth stay hidden while false stories took over? Join us as we reveal what really happened behind the scenes, and why Counting Cars vanished without a trace. The show that should not have worked, but did. Counting Cars premiered on the History Channel on August 13, 2012, and it was a spin-off of a spin-off. The History Channel had discovered, through the enormous success of Pawn Stars, that audiences were genuinely interested in watching real business people navigate real transactions in real time, as long as the personalities doing the navigating were interesting enough. The show was set up as a natural extension of the Pawn Stars universe, but it quickly established its own identity and purpose. Where Pawn Stars was about acquisition and value assessment, Counting Cars was about transformation. The cars that came into Count's Customs arrived as one thing and left as something genuinely different. The classic muscle cars and motorcycles that defined the shop's output had a specific aesthetic that the Las Vegas custom car community recognized as Danny Koker's signature work. Heavy, American, deliberately retro. The kind of build that says something specific about who commissioned it and who built it. The show translated that work for television in a way that made it legible to people who had never held a wrench, without dumbing anything down. That combination of accessibility and genuine expertise is why the show worked at all. At its peak, Counting Cars drew strong audiences on the History Channel, which had built its unscripted programming empire around exactly this kind of blue-collar, expertise-driven reality format. The show ran comfortably through its first several seasons without any of the drama that would eventually define its later years. Danny Koker was charismatic and quotable. Kevin Mack, his longtime friend and the shop's manager, provided the deadpan counterweight to Koker's exuberance. The build crew, led by Ryan Evans as the lead painter and Shannon Eichow as the head motorcycle fabricator, delivered work that was genuinely impressive on screen. Horny Mike, the airbrush artist whose real name is Mike Henry, brought the comic energy every ensemble cast needs to sustain itself over multiple seasons without losing its sense of fun. For several years, this formula was enough. The show was working, the ratings were solid, and the shop was thriving. But even in the successful early seasons, a tension was building between two things that are genuinely difficult to make coexist: running a professional custom car business and filming a reality television show about running that same business. How did those two things start pulling in opposite directions, and what did that tension eventually cost the show? The impossible pressure of being both a show and a business. Count's Customs was a real shop taking on real customer projects for real money. The cars and motorcycles being built were commissioned work that customers had paid for and expected to receive on a schedule. Running a professional custom shop at the level of Count's Customs requires an enormous amount of sustained focus, skilled labor, client management, parts sourcing, and problem-solving. It requires the kind of daily operational attention that does not benefit from having cameras, producers, and production schedules layered on top. And yet, that is exactly what Counting Cars required. A functioning professional business operating simultaneously as a television production set, with all the compromises that entails on both sides. Reality television production imposes its own timeline on the work being filmed, Deadlines for episodes are set by networks according to broadcast calendars, not the organic pace at which a custom restoration progresses. Cars do not cooperate with production schedules. Parts arrive late. Problems emerge that no one anticipated. A build that was supposed to take 6 weeks might take 4 months because of a single component that cannot be sourced without significant effort. In a pure business environment, this is normal and manageable. In a television production environment, this creates scheduling crises because the episode needs content by a specific date, regardless of whether the build is progressing along the timeline projected when the cameras started rolling. The pressure to deliver for the show and for the customers simultaneously is not one that becomes easier over time. If anything, it compounds. Danny Koker acknowledged this tension in various interviews across the show's run, and it became more visible in the later seasons as the shop's client list grew more ambitious and the builds became more complex. Sources close to the production described the pressure of filming while running the shop as increasingly unsustainable as the show moved through its 8th and 9th seasons. While the operational pressure was real, it was not the most dramatic thing happening inside Count's Customs during the show's run. That distinction belongs to what happened when the accountant started forging signatures and writing checks to himself from the company account. How did an embezzlement scandal inside Danny Koker's own business unfold on the set of his own television show? The Man Who Stole from the Count. Joseph Frontiera joined Count's Customs as the shop's accountant and bookkeeper in 2013. His role was not glamorous television material, payroll, budgets, financial records, tax payments, the administrative infrastructure that keeps any business functioning below the level at which it is visible. He appeared on camera occasionally, and the audience found him completely different from the louder personalities around him. On screen, he fits into the background, as the business side of a custom shop does in a show primarily about the building. Off-screen, between June 2013 and the point when Count's Customs discovered what he had been doing, Frontiera had used company funds to pay for personal airline tickets and had used company money as a down payment on his personal Land Rover Range Rover. He had created rubber stamp copies of Danny Koker's signature and Kevin Mack's signature, and used them to approve transactions that his bosses had not authorized and did not know about. He had failed to pay the company's taxes on time, resulting in an IRS penalty of approximately $18,000 on top of the direct theft. When Count's Customs conducted its own background check and discovered irregularities in the accounting records, the full picture emerged. Frontiera had misappropriated over $75,000 in company funds for personal use. Danny Koker responded the way that Danny Koker responds to things he finds unacceptable, with total decisiveness. Frontiera was removed from the company. A lawsuit was filed against him. A separate lawsuit was filed against Randstad Professionals, the Delaware-based hiring firm that had referred Frontiera for the position without disclosing his prior employment history, including prior embezzlement charges. A warrant for Frontiera's arrest was issued, but never served because he was living in Florida and successfully avoided it. The civil case was eventually settled in 2018. Frontiera paid back $41,000 and effectively disappeared from public life. He was erased from the official Counting Cars records, his name removed from the show's website as though he had never been on it at all. The embezzlement was damaging to the shop, not primarily because of the financial loss, though $75,000 plus an $18,000 IRS penalty is not a trivial amount for any business. It was damaging because of what it represented. Someone inside the show's inner circle, someone entrusted with the financial well-being of the operation, had been systematically working against the people who had given him access. The Frontiera embezzlement was the first major crack in the show's internal stability, and it was not the last legal problem the shop would face. A year before the Frontiera situation fully erupted, a customer lawsuit had already been filed against Count's Customs, raising uncomfortable questions about what the audience was actually watching every week. What happened with the Mustang, and what did it reveal about the gap between the show and the reality? The Mustang lawsuit and the gap between TV and truth. In 2014, a couple filed a lawsuit against Count's Customs over the restoration of their 1967 Ford Mustang. The car was supposed to have been featured on Counting Cars as part of a build episode, which would have given the clients the added benefit of having their restoration documented for national television, in addition to receiving the finished vehicle. The lawsuit alleged that the shop had significantly exceeded the agreed budget for the restoration, and that the work had not been performed to the standard the clients had been promised. The case was sealed, meaning neither side publicly disclosed the terms of the resolution, but the lawsuit's existence generated negative press at a time when the show's credibility was already under question from the automotive community. The automotive community's criticism of Counting Cars had never been entirely about Danny Koker or his team's abilities. It had been about the nature of what was being presented as spontaneous that was actually staged. The show presented car acquisitions as organic, with Koker approaching owners on the street or spotting vehicles in unexpected places, then negotiating on the spot. In practice, the cars and their owners had been located and pre-cleared before the cameras arrived. The negotiations had been broadly outlined in advance, and what appeared on screen was a structured reenactment of a conversation whose general contours had already been established. This was not unique to Counting Cars. It was the standard operating procedure of virtually every automotive reality show on cable television during this era. But knowing that it was standard practice for the genre did not make it less jarring for viewers, who had invested in believing the show was genuinely unscripted. The more substantive criticism, which Koker has addressed directly in interviews, was that he sometimes got his automotive facts wrong on camera and that the show did not always go back and correct the record. Koker has described himself as self-taught in both the automotive and business sides of his work, which he is genuinely proud of and which is evident in the character of his expertise: practical, hands-on, and opinionated, as people who have learned by doing tend to be. But self-taught expertise also has blind spots, and a television format that does not leave room for those blind spots to be acknowledged or corrected can turn them into reputational liabilities. The most devoted viewers trusted Counting Cars as a source of automotive knowledge. When that trust was undermined by inaccuracies, it landed harder than it would have for a show that had made no claim to authority in the first place. The lawsuits, the embezzlement, the criticism of the show's authenticity. All of these created headwinds for a show that was simultaneously dealing with cast departures that the production never fully explained to its audience. 3 significant cast members left Counting Cars under circumstances that were never addressed on screen. What happened to Scott Jones, Rolly Sabo, and Kevin Mack? And why did the show pretend their departures had not happened? The cast members who vanished without explanation. Scott Jones was the shop manager in the early seasons of Counting Cars. He was the business conscience of the operation, the voice that pointed out when a build would cost more than the estimate and when the timeline would not hold. He left between the second and third seasons. The show's third season premiere briefly acknowledged that he had moved to Tennessee following the birth of his son, which was the entirety of the explanation offered to an audience that had spent 2 seasons watching him. Since then, he has maintained virtually no public profile, with rumors suggesting he opened his own shop in Greenville, Tennessee, but nothing has been confirmed. Rolly Sabo was a different kind of loss. The Hungarian-born car builder had been a fan favorite because of the unique combination of skills he brought to the shop and the personality he brought to the camera. He was a fabricator of genuine ability, with a travel history that gave the show an international dimension when he took builds to clients outside Las Vegas. He left Counting Cars because he was pursuing his own business ventures, and the show kept going without explaining to the audience why he was no longer there. Kevin Mack's disappearance from the show in 2020 was the most jarring of the three because Kevin Mack was Danny Koker's best friend of over 2 decades, the man whose name was on the checks that Frontiera had been forging signatures on, and the person who drove with Danny to pick up cars, and whose presence gave the show much of its grounded emotional core. He vanished from the screen near the end of the show's run, and neither the production nor Kevin Mack himself offered any public explanation. Fans speculated. Kevin maintained an active social media presence that showed him happy and healthy, which eventually quieted the worst of the concern, but the mystery of why he stopped appearing publicly was never resolved. The cast was thinning, the legal battles had created ongoing negative press, and the operational pressure of filming while running the business was unsustainable. But the factor that ultimately determines whether a network keeps making a show or stops is always the same: the ratings. What was happening to Counting Cars' viewership in the years before 2021, and how much of the show's end was simply a network doing the mathematics of what a show costs versus what it delivers? The real goodbye. Counting Cars aired its 10th and final season in 2021, and nobody who worked on the show, at the network, or in the production company said it was the last one. The show simply ended the way shows end, when no one wants to have the conversation about ending, by not being renewed, without the courtesy of a formal cancellation that would have at least given the audience closure. The ratings had been declining throughout the later seasons in ways the network's executives could not have failed to notice. The specific viewership numbers for individual episodes were not publicized, but the trajectory was visible in how the show was scheduled and promoted in its later years. Less prominently positioned, fewer promotional pushes, the kind of quiet demotion that a network gives a show it is no longer betting on before it stops ordering new episodes. The broader cable television landscape was also changing in ways that worked against Counting Cars, regardless of what was happening specifically inside the show. The format that had made Pawn Stars and its spin-offs so successful in the early 2010s, the blue-collar expertise reality show where real people did real work in real time, had been replicated so many times by 2019 that the genre itself had lost its freshness. American Pickers, Storage Wars, American Restoration, Rust Valley Restorers, Car Masters, Rust to Riches. The market was saturated with variations on the same premise, and the audience for this type of content was fragmenting across streaming platforms in ways that traditional cable viewership numbers could not fully capture. The viewers who had been reliably tuning into Counting Cars on Tuesday nights were, by 2021, distributed across Netflix, YouTube, Hulu, and a dozen other platforms that had discovered the same audience with similar content. The cable dominance that had made History Channel the home of this format was eroding, and shows that depended on that dominance for their cultural context were eroding with it. Then came the rumors. The internet invented Danny Koker's death. It invented his cancer diagnosis. It invented his prison sentence. It invented a fake Fox News appearance where he was promoting CBD oil products, complete with screenshots that looked real enough to fool people who had not followed the original sources. Fake news sites generated traffic by publishing versions of these stories without fact-checking them. Social media amplified the most dramatic versions. The misinformation became so persistent that staff members at Counts Customs regularly had customers asking in person whether Danny was actually in jail. Koker's own response to the rumors, delivered in a face-to-face interview published by Top Speed in 2025, was a specific kind of amused exasperation. "Apparently, I'm in jail like every other week," he said. He described doing a mock perp walk when he entered the room where the interview was taking place because someone on the shop staff had told him about yet another wave of arrest rumors before he sat down. The question of whether counting cars will return has never been fully closed, because the History Channel has never formally said it will not. Koker told the Las Vegas Review-Journal in October 2025 that he was weighing TV options and that he remained eager to be back on screen. Whether that happens on History, on a streaming platform, or in some other format enabled by the current media landscape is a question the next few years will answer. But Counting Cars, which existed from 2012 to 2021, is done in the specific, unsatisfying way that things end when no one involved can bring themselves to say the words. Which season of Counting Cars do you think was the best? And do you want to see it come back? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.